Coming to you straight from the Rio Grande and beyond, broadcasting to the four corners of the globe. So grab your seat, your coffee, or your sundowner.
Okay, everybody, here we go.
On point, as always. This is Gloves Off. Gloves Off.
Back at you and Gloves Off. I'm Paul Buitron. I'm here with a great brother of mine, and he's become my brother in the last decade. That's Grandmaster Bram Frank. And we're touching base on the Bowie and his design on the Bowie and how it's taken off. Because to me, I love the Bowie. I was trained with La Larga when I was a kid here in South Texas, which La Larga is a Bowie. And I'm fascinated by it, all the tails, and I just love his design. So I want to congratulate you on a great design. But let's touch base on how you started it off and how everything got in there, because we're never too old to learn.
Got it. Well, first of all, thank you for the kind words. And what Brother Paul said, he really has, for the past decade, been my guardian angel as well as my brother. So if you people don't understand that, this man pays me the greatest respect, takes care of me, and is so kind to me. I never know what to do. But and we share a love of blades and stuff. And for buoys, they're the iconic, as you know, the iconic American blade. And
Sure.
there's all the myth about it and all the legend. And for all the stuff that's associated with Jim Bowie, and I'm so glad, they have a personality to attach to it. We don't really have a lot of stuff that shows that he actually did even more than that one sandbar fight. And it's like a gunslinger reputation that got built up in all the magazines of the time and the few, and the newspapers, that he was more of a legend. The fact that he was at the Alamo, the fact that he really did do this stuff, just created, and it caught on people's imagination. But because it's an iconic tool, it's grown in many ways. And Brother Paul, I've talked about some of the first buoys, because there were not a lot of American manufacturers. We had some custom makers. Sheffield of England, which brought lots of our stuff. Some of the original, what we called Bowie knives, that got referred to because it was a marketing tool, were Sheffield knives. And they were basically flat grind, simple, almost like basically chef knives. And a proper chef knife with that part of the blade that comes down so your handle won't slide in and to give you the arc, really was a useful tool. And you and I have talked about some of the changes that I categorize it into like three groups of generic buoys. That there's what I call the Texas Bowie idea and family, which includes all the Mexican area, because that was part of Mexico back then. This is what I call the frontier area. People used big knives and they became known as buoys. And then what you and I had also talked about, what I always refer to as the Louisiana, the cultured Bowie people, because it was sort of the HEMA and the fencing schools that took it in to do it. And they're sort of the ones that actually got it banned, because nobody else was looking to duel with it or use it contra person. And for people who don't know, in Europe, a lot of when they do the cartoons of the old German saber masters and, the German and the Austrian officers, with their, monocle and the scar. Well, the scar on their left side was these guys from a lot of times from saber stuff, and some even self-inflicted, that made them look so tough because of shifting out of the way. And that was a first target off that primary strike. And the turning of the blade coming in, what we would call a back cut. But that kind of culture, so that's why I break up the few things. And because of the schools, buoys in Louisiana and that general Southeast region started being used for dueling, and people were being maimed and hurt. So in the 1800s, it became one of the first tools to ever be outlawed because of people dueling with it. In Louisiana, because it's Napoleonic law. It's one of, even to today, it's Napoleonic law. And people go, big deal. I said, well, every state has its own, legal priorities and what they do. And Napoleonic law back then allowed for dueling. It allowed for that kind of insults. It doesn't work the same. It's like Virginia. Virginia is a magistrate system. It's not a regular judge and court system, from the old British thing. So you can run there, you can run to any magistrate, you get anybody arrested on it at a whim. God help you if you've lied. That's, here, so that's how the magistrate. I didn't realize till I was here working with law enforcement and with the attorneys there. And same kind of thing in Napoleonic law, you have different levels of proof, but dueling was accepted. I know it's a little bit of a babble here, but that's what led to development of different types of buoys and different why people argue about how would I handle it, how would I hold it. I
You know,
happen to know. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm going to interject just a little bit because we're talking about Louisiana. A lot of people do not know that New Orleans had more fencing schools, more martial schools, more dueling schools than any city in the world up to past World War One. They had many of them, and a lot of those individuals just died out back then because number one, it was outlawed. Here in Texas, the Bowie knife is actually an illegal knife, even though you can carry whatever blade you want now. But past a couple of years ago, it was an illegal knife, and people would carry it around in the ranch and go to Renaissance, all this, but they were carrying around a blade that was actually illegal. And what was illegal about it was that a lot of the Bowies in Texas, the last tip, I'm going to get a practice blade. The last tip was actually sharpened, not the whole black blade, just the tip. So, like you said, they'll use it on a back cut. But what happens is that was actually part of the penal code. You couldn't use that or any gravity blade, such as a sacatripa or a straight razor. And in Louisiana, the penal code kind of changed, and the penal code is right now is any blade that you use in a crime. So it kind of changes. But you're correct. The Bowie blade or the Bowie knife coming out of Louisiana is it's different than the other ones out there. Today, this is what I'll say. It's preference to the person.
Yeah.
And how he wants to carry it, and how he wants to use it, and what he thinks he should use it like. And there's a lot of people out there teaching knives. I mean, there's more people teaching knives than there ever was before. Yeah. So, it's just up to that person to understand, but that's a different subject and that's a different matter. But let's talk about your knives, because your knives, I like the design and I like the way it's going. I like it.
Just so everyone knows, Professor Paul loves what I'm doing, and Doug Mercado has become real interested in buoys. He said I encouraged him, so it's been the last couple shows in Texas, knife shows that were dedicated to buoys, and he's actually looking to do a documentary about buoys with History Channel, and maybe include. But what happened was, and I'm just going to grab a lot of just a regular, what people call a big knife. Nothing special about the handle. That's what was, like a frontier type buoy. Wasn't designed for, killing people or dueling. It's just a big work knife. Oh, by the way, I think almost 2 years ago, I believe Knife Rights got people the right to carry buoys in Texas. I think they just changed the law.
Well, the law was changed that you can carry any blade fixed or folding in Texas. But what I remember, it's 2 years ago that came
right now. Yeah, Knife Rights had pushed it through. I think they specifically, because they're trying to get that people could, as you said, carry it out hunting or on range and not be carrying an illegal weapon, just doing the work. But I just want to say that what's become standard, people might know the Western Company. They had the big like cutlass type buoy used in a lot of times in World War One. And again, it's what he said, it's preference. I'm not a big cutlass type guy, but I always liked big, simple buoys. So that was in my head, and a lot of people might recognize, I'm sure you do, the Musso buoys. And a
Sure.
Musso buoy, no matter what size, always, because it was designed for dueling, has that sharp clip of the idea of that on a back cut, that tip punctures in no matter what, and then carries through, that I always make contact. It has the brass strip to catch other people's blades, and Mussos were always wide buoys. And, the size of the handle depended upon who had it. But this is not a work buoy. This is people who thought they were, like the people carry fancy knives in their pockets, that carried it for show, or these guys actually, fought with it. And I like looking at it. It's classic, but not my kind to carry around. And then you and I both are friends of, Bill Bagwell, who was a very famous buoy maker and liked long, thin buoys. Oh, backtrack for one. I'll get that when I talk about carrying. Bill loved the coffin handle, and with an escutcheon plate.
I carry a buoy just like that, and I carry it all the time with me. And the reason I carry it because I can conceal it and I can move it. If I'm wearing.
You remember Bill always would. All the guys who worked with Bagwell, down in their pants, would pull it out. When we're in New Orleans, a policeman said, "What do you mean you all teach buoy?" Because he was a friend of the officer. Again, I apologize. I forgot the guy's name. He's on the New Orleans police force. And he was there with me and Keating and Bagwell and Micklemore and Rob Langford, the whole group of us, because we were doing a buoy seminar down there and stuff, and researching the schools. And everybody pulls out these buoys out of their pants with Bill's sheath with that little knob on it to just lock in. He goes, "You guys are carrying those?" And like Lassie's going like, "Yeah." Guy goes, "If you weren't with another officer, I'd arrest you guys. It's illegal." And they went, No, we're part of a seminar. Don't worry, we're the good guys." And he's like, "Oh my God." But like you said, Brother Paul, he carries it every day. I happen to like Bill's. I like the idea. What I laugh about is the classic Spanish notch
Sure.
in the blade, because it's going to break. You've weakened the blade, the edge. And the idea that you're going to catch someone's blade in it, it's more concept and style than functional. And I understand the idea. And Bill liked that uneven half U shape, guard. But it's what Bill would call a fighting buoy because it's light and fast. And that swedge is just that little bit of sharp and curve for that back cut. And I always liked it. I liked the coffin handle, and the fact that the escutcheon plate was to let you know what side you were at. And a traditional work buoy and a Bagwell buoy also work and we call frontier cutting, that I can grab it safely and have the main edge up. So my back cut is actually with the primary edge, and that what I would do a back cut is with the secondary, my primary, I'm cutting with, but a back cut with all its power came into this, and they're easy to roll in your hand. You can change the. I always appreciate it, but there was something about it, and I'm a Randall guy. And Randall, Raymond Thorpe has the Raymond Thorpe buoy, which has a wider blade along with a clip on it. And of course, I wish I had them here. I don't have a searless and I don't have an iron mistress. I wish I did. The searless is a very elegant chef knife.
Yeah.
And I could picture Bowie and Gentleman carrying that because it's simple and straight and stunning and a flat grind, very wonderful. Well, Raymond Thorpe said that's not what he thought the buoys looked like. And Jim Bowie didn't make knives. Resin, his brother, was a blacksmith. He made him the knives. In the Alamo, they got the Alamo buoy. They've got a couple other people, some of the families from Mexico who said they were the ones that took the original buoy from the Alamo back to Mexico, back. Resin Bowie, after Jim had a little fame, actually made a series of buoys. So they're real buoys. Nobody knows if Jim actually carried them, but they're They're Bowie buoys. Resin Bowie made them. James Black, who's famous for making buoys for resin and for Jim to carry. Well, there's a series of those. Anyways, what I'm leading up to is Raymond Thorpe had his that he liked. And then Bo Randall made that original Smithsonian buoy because he thought that the Raymond Thorpe was too big. So based on the book, The Iron Mistress, in that description of a buoy, they made this what's called the Smithsonian buoy. So, and it's called that because it's Randall's version of an Iron Mistress, and it's on this permanent display in the Smithsonian and accepted by a lot of historians as the classic Jim Bowie buoy.
Correct.
And next to it is the Raymond Thorpe buoy, which is a little longer and getting towards the Confederate and the fighting buoys because they were swordsmen of that time. So they want like the an Arkansas toothpick used by the Confederates is because they were used to swords and they had it. But anyway, so all that because I worked, I'm very close with Randall and I'm their liaison between the martial art world and knife world. And I know it's nothing with Jim Bowie. I love Tarzan. And Tarzan was famous for using his father's Sheffield buoy that made him king of the jungle. And it wasn't a cook knife. Because the buoys, when Robert E. Howard, who was part of the U.S. Cavalry and went to military school, to him it was a fighting buoy. So it probably, again, a searless or something like that, a real buoy for use. I decided to make myself, at Randall, working with the late Pete Hamilton, make myself a Bram Tarzan buoy. So it's got a flat handle. I flattened it out. I picked my own, got a brass butt to make, and what we consider from the lugged hilts that were used on the Iron Mistress and on the Raymond Thorpe buoy. And then I did my own version of a Model 14, where, of course, this is sharp. It's not a really wide blade, and the balance is in my hand, so I could do what you and I talked about, change it from edge up to edge down, all in my roll. And yet I still had a strong stud to capture it. It's just, and I have a distal taper. It doesn't give me a Bram grab. You know me. I'm a firearms guy, and as much as Randall's are some of my favorite, and I like a firearms grip. And that on all of my folding buoys, I have that same firearm grip. My hand structure's in forward and reverse grip.
And those are great knives I'm going to interject here real quick. And those knives are great. I carry one of those, and believe me, I've carried it in the field for years. And we used to do a lot of hunting for hogs and all kinds of game. And believe me, I've cleaned a whole bunch of hogs with a blade. Just
Brother Paul actually uses my knives for real. People go, "Oh, I carry your knife," and go, "Do you use it?" Well, I got Rocky. Rocky owns a farm, so he and his son have my knives. They do the same. They're cutting bales of twine. They're doing farm work. They're dressing down animals. They're like you on the hunting game, dressed on and go. So that was and I wanted to capture my buoy, which became when I made it bigger. To me, that was my classic buoy. It still wasn't my romantic buoy, which I'm leading up to. And I really wanted to make a romantic buoy. So, and buoys come, as gambler size, because something that wasn't considered a threat at a gambling table, because I could only have I had Derringers. I could carry a Derringer at a table, or my gambler buoy. So a gambler buoy, and I decided to make it a little bit wider and with a sharpened swedge. And I wanted something that, again, was a firearms grip, a saber grip, because I like to roll. So what it decided to do was it puts the pressure of the handle against my hand the same way a firearm pushes into the butt of my hand for that grip. And it's an old sword grip, so that I can sit here and roll. It also means I'm not up on the guard. A lot of people like to get up on the guard, and I go, if I bounce off the guard, all I've got is my hand right there. And I
Absolutely.
wanted a lugged guard. And when I was talking about a Spanish notch, I wanted to get that effect. So I make a double ranked choil in here
Yep.
instead of a notch with the guard. So something, and also on the top, because of my Bramp right here, I can catch in there. And of course, this was my Gambler. I don't have the Hunter here because, well, I have John Stanley's attack knife. I'm having these made for my birthday. So I have the prototype trainer of the Hunter, which is 8 inches, my next one up. And John's got the live one there, but we're practicing so that we can practice, locking a blade. And I'm gonna get back to that in a second. I have to pick up the Muso. Just make sure I don't cut myself, Brother Paul. You know me, I start grabbing. The Muso buoy with the idea of the brass piece to actually stop and catch a blade because it would bite.
Yep.
I was thinking about that, and that's the backside. So this is my version of an Iron Mistress. And I have a really thick back piece rather than some brass. I didn't put some brass that I can still catch it back. And my blades, like I said, are the opposite of a Spanish notch, a little Spanish notch on the bottom. I want to be able that when the blade's coming in, I can use that back, just like it's got the brass on it, lock in, and now it locks in and I can torque it out of the way. And I'm not trying to do a blade to blade thing and slide down to a Spanish notch where my edge is the edge. So I can still do my back edge to it. And before I hurt the polycarbonate by using a steel, I'll do steel to steel. That I can take this in here, that edge comes in rather than edge trying to run to a small notch. I can come back, catch it. Oh, and it's trapped and I can jack it around. And then I can do that back cut as I come back up.
Absolutely.
And I love, the book, The Iron Mistress. I love the buoy that came from that, the movie with Alan Ladd. And that sort of became, to me, an iconic buoy. And I grew up with the television series Jim Bowie. And the buoy in that, it only lasted 3 seasons. And I finally got DVD copies of it because I grew up watching it. And he had basically the television version of the Iron Mistress from the book and from Alan Ladd's movie, which is from 1956. I was 3 years old when it came out. And I grew up seeing that and watching Jim Bowie on television always use his Bowie knife. And I guess that's what stuck in my head. So I made my Tarzan buoy, but in my head, I wanted a lugged one that would guard that I could do what Jim Bowie did. So I just made this for my birthday. Yes, it's Damascus. And I tried to incorporate what you and I are talking about. My swedge up here is sharp. And that swedge up here sharp and it's angled. So when I do a back cut, this angle, if I just roll my blade to a forward, that's that same matching angle because your wrist doesn't bend the same way. So I had to angle this like I did in the knives I did for Special Forces for Recon and Delta on my Albanico, that when I did that back cut, because of the way I wrist blade, that I can get this to be able to give me a cut that equals a forward edge.
Absolutely. See, and a lot of people don't understand, or don't want to understand that. I guess that's the best way to put it. There's a lot of great people out there teaching, folks. We're not digging on anybody. There's a lot of great people out there teaching. There's people out there that you can get a lot of ideas from. And I'm going to go into training. What I suggest people to do is get some good basics behind you and then start cross training and open your eyes, but get some good basics and start playing around. Just don't go out there and get some blade and watch a couple of YouTube videos by a bunch of other people and a bunch of people, even good people that are out there on YouTube land. And all of a sudden you're faced with something that you're going to try, but you do not have the skill to back yourself up. And
right. And if you do it for real against someone,
yeah,
there's going to be repercussions because if you do some of this Dungeons and Dragons on people, you you and I've talked about this, Brother Paul, and for all of you listening, that when they say judge by a jury of our peers, it ended up being the common man. They didn't expect that differences in occupation or whatever. And if I was judged or you were judged by a jury of 12 other martial artists, I'm going home every day. You're going home every day. You take non-martial artists, especially guys with these Dungeons and Dragons, say, I can kill the bad guy, chop him up, and nothing's going to happen. Not in today's world, which led me to, and you know that I tend to be a little elegant. I believe in, I teach the Black Knight, the Monty Python stuff, because I've always believed in old style. I take away your hands. No hands, you can't hurt me. I can defend that in court. I don't touch your face, your head, your neck. And I know for dueling, I tend to be, some Bowie people said, find someone who fits your personality. I'm part of that Louisiana educated training because I like HEMA. I like historical European martial arts. I love that armor stuff. All, from ancient times all the way through the end of the Renaissance period. Anything, Pat, that just doesn't fire my boat per se. But I love that feel. And my FMA is more Spanish based of what goes on Spanish fencing and dueling. And so for me to take Spanish, and people also don't understand the French and the Spanish were one big intermarried family in Europe. There was no line there that the French, French and Spanish are very close in language, and those families intermarried all the time. And a lot of the stuff they shared for hundreds and probably thousands of years, but at least for hundreds of years, there's no real difference in their approach. So when you go to French dueling schools and Spanish dueling, guess what? The saber work and everything the same. In South America and places, they still have saber masters. They still have military corps. Well, that's part of your curriculum and Big Blade. Anyways, all of it led to me. Some people go to do and said, I admit I don't do frontier Bowie, use it for work all the time. I don't do Texas Mexican style where when I get aggravated, I'm going to turn my blade edge up. But as a secret for everyone watching this, and I was just showing Tom and Ed that this morning, my grip, people go, you can only grip it one way. I said, no. The butt of my hand is designed to fit in here, that it locks in my hand even edge up. And I drive it with the same butt, and now I'm protected down here. You can't, that I can cut with it, and then I can roll it back. So I wanted to be able to do that. We don't put these in reverse grip, though. We do reverse edge. We don't do reverse grip.
Yep, absolutely. And a lot of people need to know this. A lot of the schools, here in the U.S., it's you're innocent until proven guilty. The Neopolonic law, you're guilty until proven innocent. And there's a lot of stuff in the Neopolonic law, and Mexico's part of the Neopolonic law is mutilation. So when you cut somebody in the face, you just mutilated them. So you're going to add time to yourself. So I see all these people that you can cut the nose and I can cut the lip, and you're going to thrust it to the face. It's fine and dandy in a self-defense situation as needed if fear is involved. But if you go to court and you get a prosecutor that's against you, one that's trying to make a name for yourself, they just tacked on a bunch of stuff to you.
Yes.
And
Brother Paul, you and I, in a couple of other podcasts, had talked about it. One of the reasons people collected ears, when we go out into the jungle or on deployments, whether you were cavalry or whatever, even in the old days, ancient times, is if I have no ears, I didn't mutilate someone. I didn't disfigure them. It's not a blood feud that would come up. But you take off someone's nose, their lips, slash their face so they're disfigured. Well, that could be a blood feud that goes on forever. And I look at people, and you've seen them, the new draw point. Everyone wants to get that blade out. Obviously, it's very hard to do that with a Bowie to come up reverse grip, get it out. But They all want to first thing poke out people's eyes, puncture holes, slash their faces. I saw one guy, I will let him remain nameless. So remember, I called you right afterwards. He invited me to a seminar. His people are chanting, high, low, switch over, cut throat, slit the, sever the spinal cord, puncture down, cut off the testicles, disembowel the guy. And they're all chanting as they're going on and screaming. And I'm like, I pulled them aside and said, do you have a caveat? I mean, like, do you tell these people this is historical only? They can't do this on the street? Oh, no, they can. I said, okay, you're right. I said that wrong. They may not do. I know they can, but they may not because they're going to jail. And if you have videos of you online showing you telling them cut the throat, sever the carotids, chop through the spinal cord, punch out their organs, poke their eyes out, that doesn't sound like self-defense. And you're mutilating. And I go, if somehow it was deemed you had the right to defend yourself, then they're going to go, what kind of tool did you use? How did you use it? And what was your intent? And if you beat all that, you still could have civil charges going. You blinded that person. You maimed the poor women who've been, cut apart with razor blades, and and they're lucky they put them back together. But even with plastic surgeons, they are scarred for life.
Absolutely. And people need to understand. I'm going to go back a little bit to the training with, and I asked my Professor Patorel a question in Savant, and I was taking class with him, and he set me aside and he said, because I was about to test for my monitorship in France, and I had to do a thesis, and he says, I'm going to tell you one thing. I have to teach you, there's a line. I have to teach you all the good techniques to be a good person. And I also have to teach you all the bad techniques to be a bad person. But you're the one that's going to have to differentiate that. Because if I do not teach you what's bad and you only think of all this as good, you're going to go to the street or you're going to be in the ring and somebody's going to pull out something from the bad side. You're not going to recognize it and you're going to be hurt. So the only reason I'm teaching you this is for you to be able to recognize it, for you to defend yourself against it.
Well, and in my training methodology that I teach the police and the military, I do, because people have flow drills. And I said, no, I separated that. The first guy attacking is the bad guy, and he's going to a target zone to try to maim you. You, the good guy, we cut the limb and do whatever. My counter, I become the bad guy. I'm trying to disembowel them, cut their genitalia off. I'm trying to injure them or thrust through their organs so they know to do it. Stop it. Wait, we stop that. The good guy, we cut the hand, redirect the arm, break, whatever. And then we come right back at their face, whether we're splitting their head, going at their eyes, and we learn to defend that. And when we counter on that, we start to drill all over, only it's from what I now go to cut your head off or cut your neck or do whatever. People, what are you doing? I said, just what you say. I want the attacker to be the bad guy. So we recognize the bad guy attacks. And as a good guy, we learn to deal with that, because the coolest thing about an edge tool is that less than lethal is the best response, because less than lethal means I'm shutting the guy down. Firearm, it's stupid to use it for anything but lethality and shut them down. A stick, any kind of impact tool, I really want to shut function down, but if I can pop you in the head and shut that computer center down, more power to me. But I can take them. But a blade, if I can make you the Black Knight, your hands don't work, which is in every sword manual. Some of the old tapestries have shown some of the old, the fight books. And people, what's a fight book? I said, well, the old knights in armor and the masters they had some of the best artists of their time, do the books for them. And, I showed people, said, that's a cartoon. I said, no. And you see the guy's hand or his arm, because his hand is drawn in the air holding the sword. I go, that's real. In Japan, in the movies, they're banging swords and banging on their armor. In real, if I could cut your hands off, I won. I didn't have to do anything else. And when I grew up with my dad working because my dad worked in the museums as, restoring stuff. And I grew up in the Art Museum of Philadelphia, which is filled with arms and armor. It's just like the Metropolitan of New York, where I spent many, many, many hours growing up and studying arms and armor with them. A lot of times, if someone didn't donate the sword to the museum, if it's uncovered on the battlefield, a lot of times they used to recover the hand with the sword until we saw what kind of gauntlet they had that went with the hand, or it was still clutching the sword, when it was uncovered on the battlefield, when they dug them up. And I'm like, it's less than lethal works great with blades. And I always, and I tell my guys, if I make you, when I did biomechanical shutdown, if I shut down your flexors, you cannot hold something. If I shut down your bicep, you cannot pick your hand up. If I cut your tricep, you cannot extend. It'll be locked up. I cut your bicep, your arm will extend. If I get rid of your thumb, we're monkeys, because monkeys don't have opposing digits. It's very hard to hold things. We're unique. We have 4 fingers, not 5, and an opposing digit, which is why we can do so many cool things, from grabbing to holding things. And I tell people, when I had to deal with my guys and terrorists, that's why I love big blades. And by the way, people, that's why a lot of military knives have to be a minimum of 7 inches. It was measured on what kind of depth penetration. Not that you're trying to step, but how much depth could I get to do lethal force to a heart or lungs or organs going through their clothing and through what was there. Because anything less than that, no guarantee. Which is why I love those daggers in the old days. Why are they so big? Because if I didn't get my sword there, the dagger, my backup had to be long enough to know, because it was designed for killing people. It wasn't for play.
And
then you get dueling school, which is romantic.
I'm glad you're saying that, because, and I'm going to interject again, because a lot of people do not understand that clothing changes
Yes.
outside. And when in the real situation, it changes dramatically. And people say, no, it doesn't. Yes, it does. And the way we train, I keep telling folks this, the way you train in school, in class, like I tell my guys, you guys got a guard, you guys better be 100% with a guard, because in the street, you already removed 20%. So if this is your 100, in the street's going to be right here. If this is my 100, more likely it's going to be right here in the street. It's not going to be to perfection. So if you're playing around just empty-handed and your hands, like in some styles, never get up here, they're not going to go up in the street.
No, you can only do as you train.
Absolutely. It's like you said, you might be cutting this way, but I guarantee you in the street it's going to come out this way. But if you train to telegraph a motion automatically in the street, well, it's of course they're going to telegraph. That's what makes a trained individual that's seasoned and capable, because those are 3 different things: trained, seasoned, and capable. When you have those 3 elements together, that is a very, very dangerous individual. And I'm glad that a lot of those individuals that I know that have that little formula together, they're very peaceful, because that's what they're trying to attain. But if one of those is not missing, you might be a trained martial artist, but not capable of doing the damage when need be. Forget about it. Something's going to happen to you in the street in real life.
Yeah. And I was working with, Tom and Ed this morning. We're always doing, they go, sir, you're always inside your shoulders. I go, there's nothing else out there. I said, what I want you guys to realize is when I'm in here, I said, I rotate my core and that extends my tool. I'm not flapping my arms and my wings. I said, because I firmly believe from the old way, if I can touch you, you're cut already. Meaning that if I get close to you and you shift, oh, well, that's a chef cut. If I touch you and you back away, that's a slice cut. And I'm going to use that tool to cover my line, because my hands are, my blades are, as you know, it's pointed. It's in front of me, protecting me. I'm protecting my knife. Are you stupid? It's supposed to protect you. Now, the coolest thing about, and like I said, I love playing with my gambler at the table. Just where we hit it. I'm on a tempered glass table. So the gambler is good because I usually don't hit the table. But my Iron Mistress, Brother Paul, it's like a mini bolo to me. It's just long enough that, boy, do I have some reach. And I was showing the boys today, using the camera's example, I said, you can't tell how close I've gotten to the camera. So that when I do that typical popping up, that fencing move, and I push it, and I'm pushing with my elbow, so it moves it, so I get that first chef cut, and then the pop, that typical Bowie pop and go. Guess what? It's coming up your eyes, and you can't see where it's going. And just doing what you and I would call a regular straight punch, well, that same motion, you can see the blade as it pops. There's that popping up. And as you say, I like to control right in here because we've trained together, done some stuff. I tend to be right in here. And someone says, what? I said, well, as soon as you pull it back, that's when I'm going in. Why? Because you pulled it back. Why? Because you know what? You left the vacuum. Well, sir, you don't leave a lot of space. I said, I've learned that if I put edge to edge, I'll ruin it. But you cut at me and I put the flat of the blade, I can put that flat there every day. Why? Because it's steel. If it saves my life, great. And I'm not ruining my edge. If I got the flat, when I pass it back, ooh. But that's what I like about Bowies. It gives me a comfortable big knife. And I know you've carried one. And there's something cool about the feel of a Bowie. And I apologize to the people who are Western Bowie people and what I call the Texas and Mexican area, their Bowies, because they're really cool. Like I said, work. And then there's a cultural use from that whole area where Bowies are iconic. And I tend to be, like I said, because I do FMA, and my Wing Chun, because I've told you what I learned about Wing Chun, which most people didn't, is it's a blade art, which is why Barchando, the 8 chop, was kept so far in the background. Because if you figured out all your Wing Chun hand motions were teaching you a blade, no kidding, you could be dangerous. And I remember when William Chung was talking, brought that out. All these people go, no one wanted to go on his 2-week Barchando seminar. I went 4 weeks. I spent every seminar he did, I was there doing Barchando. So people said, what are you doing? I went, he's teaching me about Hong Kong Wing Chun blade. And what I found interesting was his Wing Chun blades just look like an American Bowie, not one of those big cleavers like you'd use in a kitchen. You know? So it's, I just, I love the feel, of a Bowie. And I have another design that's showing you. The blade's not as wide, but I worked with Taj Mahal. I have to left turn at Albuquerque many years ago, a friend in Pakistan. And that's where, Hank Reinhardt and a lot of the museum replicas are actually made to view. Oh, Pakistan. I said, they've been making swords for thousands of years. The only reason those poor people make inexpensive stuff is they've been expensive. But if you ask any of those real sword or armor makers there, they can make anything. It's like, oh, China. They've been making swords for thousands of years. The only reason they sell cheap stuff is American companies, Europeans want profit. They'll make you anything you want, any quality. Anyways, he made me a chef knife. I think I showed you my Damascus chef knife.
Absolutely. But let's do this. What's because it's beauty. We're running out of time. And folks, if you guys want to get a Bowie, these are great Bowies to get. How can they get in touch with you?
Okay.
Brad?
They could go up to my website and leave a message, cssd-sc.com. If they go to brambirthdaybash.com, there's still time to sign up for my 3-day instructor camp where we're going to specialize July 21, 22, 23 in Vancouver, Washington, just north of Portland. It's actually, if there was no river there, Vancouver, Washington would be the north part of Portland, but the river separates it. We're going to be working on it. And just so everyone knows, these will not be available to the public till after my birthday. So on the 25th of July, Taj, that's what I'm saying. I put my drawings out and Taj went, Bram, I can make those for you. For after all the years of me showing you that, remember the drawings, Taj made me a set and everyone loved them and I loved them. So the Bram Bowie Bolo, a 14-inch, a big 14-inch like a Bagwell, and the Hunter, the 8-inch, this one, because this is my Iron Mistress, will be available. And John Stanley Attack Knife is going to have the matching polycarbonate unbreakable trainers to go with them. And I'll have the full, after my birthday, the full training program online as well. But they go to my website, cssd-sc.com, leave a message, or brambirthdaybash.com, and come register and come take my 3-day, any one of the three, or the full 3-day instructor camp this July, where we're specializing for the first time Bram Bowies.
And folks,
And, by the way, for the plug, just so they're all handmade, hand forged Damascus blades.
and just to tell folks a little bit something. If you guys want to learn and get a good blade, that's the place to be. Brother, thank you once more and best of luck. And I know your birthday's coming around and we'll end up getting one of those Bowies and we'll do something here in the near future. Folks out there, you all stay safe, be safe. And again, God bless you all.
Thank you. God bless.